Aidan, exiled from his kingdom, wandered through a dense forest that seemed untouched by time. The forest canopy was thick, barely allowing sunlight to penetrate. Birds sang from hidden perches, their melodies haunting yet beautiful. Aidan's footsteps were muffled by the carpet of moss and fallen leaves. As he pushed through a particularly dense thicket, Aidan stumbled upon an overgrown path. Curiosity piqued, he followed it, the foliage gradually giving way to reveal the ruins of an ancient city. The city was a shadow of its former glory, with ivy climbing over crumbling walls and nature reclaiming the stone streets. It felt like stepping into a forgotten era. In the heart of the city stood a majestic temple, its architecture grandiose yet eroded by time. The temple was surrounded by statues larger than life, depicting beings of various forms, some humanoid, others less so. Despite their stillness, each statue radiated a palpable aura of power. Drawn to the temple, Aidan noticed intricate carvings on its walls, depicting scenes of battles and ceremonies. He ran his fingers over the carvings, feeling the grooves and ridges. Without realizing, he pressed a hidden stone, and a deep rumble echoed through the air. The ground trembled beneath his feet. One by one, the statues began to move. Dust and small stones tumbled down as the beings, the forgotten, stretched and looked around. Their eyes, glowing with ancient wisdom, fixed on Aidan. They were an assortment of majestic, fearsome, and ethereal figures. Some had wings that unfurled grandly, while others had limbs that twisted in ways that defied nature. Their expressions were a mix of confusion, curiosity, and caution. Aidan, standing amidst these awakening giants, felt a rush of awe and fear. The forgotten, once revered and feared, now stood before him, brought back to the world by his accidental touch. One of the beings, towering and clad in armor that seemed to blend with its stone skin, stepped forward. Its voice was deep and resonant, echoing off the temple walls. "Who awakens us from our slumber?" it asked, its eyes piercing into Aidan's very soul. Aidan, gathering his courage, replied, "I am Aidan, a prince unjustly exiled. I seek allies in my quest to reclaim my throne." The beings exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Aidan stood his ground, knowing that this moment could change his fate forever. The forgotten beings of immense power shunned by the gods were now awake, and their next actions would shape the course of history. In the heart of the ancient city, amidst the ruins that whispered of a bygone era, Aidan stood before the forgotten. The air was still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The forgotten, towering and otherworldly, listened intently as Aidan recounted his tale, a story of betrayal, loss, and an unquenchable thirst for justice. "My brother usurped my throne through deceit and treachery," Aidan spoke, his voice steady but filled with underlying passion. "He has plunged our kingdom into darkness and despair. I seek to reclaim what is rightfully mine and bring peace to our land." The forgotten, silent for eons, listened to this mortal prince. They were beings of immense power, once revered and later shunned and forgotten by the gods themselves. Aidan's words seemed to stir something within them. A longing for a purpose, a desire to be part of the world once more. "We have slumbered for centuries, hidden from the world of men and gods," said the leader of the forgotten, his voice echoing like thunder. "Your world has changed, but our power remains. What do you offer us in return for our aid?" Aidan met the leader's gaze, unflinching. "I offer you a chance to be remembered again, to have your power recognized and feared. Together, we can reshape this world. I will be your guide in this new era, and in return, I ask for your strength to reclaim my throne." A murmur ran through the ranks of the forgotten. They conversed in their ancient tongue, a language that sounded like the wind through the leaves and the deep rumble of the earth. Finally, they reached an agreement. "We will form this alliance, Prince Aidan," declared the leader. "Your cause shall be ours, We will lend you our strength and our knowledge. Together, we shall wage a war such as the world has never seen." In the days that followed, Aidan and the Forgotten began their preparations. They strategized, combining Aidan's knowledge of the modern world with the ancient magic and power of the Forgotten. Plans were drawn for the assault on the capital, tactics discussed to counter the forces that Aidan's brother would undoubtedly muster. The Forgotten, once mere statues, now practiced their ancient arts, readying themselves for battle. Their powers were diverse and awe-inspiring, from control over the elements to abilities that defied the laws of nature. Aidan trained alongside them, honing his skills in combat and leadership. He was no longer just an exiled prince. He was a commander of a formidable force, an alliance that could change the fate of his kingdom. As the sun set on the eve of their departure, the air was filled with a sense of impending change. Aidan and the Forgotten stood ready, united by a common cause. The journey to reclaim his throne had begun. But little did Aidan know this was just the beginning of a much larger saga, one that would entangle the fate of mortals and gods alike. As the preparations for the imminent war against his brother progressed, an unexpected shift occurred within the ranks of the Forgotten. Their ancient eyes, which had seen the rise and fall of empires, now gleamed with a renewed purpose, not just to aid Aidan, but to settle an age-old score. One evening, under a sky blanketed with stars, the Forgotten gathered around a fire that burned with an ethereal flame. Their leader, a being of towering stature and an aura of commanding presence, addressed the group with a voice that resonated with the weight of millennia. "We have been dormant for too long, hidden in the shadows, forgotten by the world," he declared. "Our return should not just be a mere whisper in the annals of history. The gods, who once revered us and then cast us aside, must be reminded of our power." A murmur of agreement rippled through the Forgotten. Their eyes burned with a fire that matched the one before them. They spoke of challenging the gods themselves, to prove their might and re-establish their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Aidan, who had been standing at the edge of the gathering, felt a surge of apprehension. Challenging the gods was a far more perilous endeavor than reclaiming a throne from a mortal usurper. He stepped forward, his voice tinged with concern. "This is a war that could bring untold devastation," Aidan warned. "The gods are not beings to be trifled with. Our original plan was to reclaim the throne, not wage a war against the heavens." The leader of the Forgotten turned his penetrating gaze towards Aidan. "Prince Aidan, you seek to reclaim your throne, a throne that was unjustly taken from you. We seek to reclaim our dignity, our place in the world. Is that not a cause worth fighting for?" Aidan knew arguing with beings as ancient and powerful as the Forgotten was a delicate matter. He also understood their desire for retribution. They had been allies in his quest, and now they sought his support in theirs. After a long moment of contemplation, Aidan spoke. "If we are to challenge the gods, we must be cautious. Their wrath knows no bounds. I will stand with you, but we must not lose sight of our original goal." The Forgotten murmured their agreement, and a pact was formed under the starlit sky. They would not only fight to restore Aidan to his throne, but also to challenge the very gods who had banished them to obscurity. Aidan, though apprehensive, knew that this alliance had grown into something far greater than he had anticipated. He had sought an army. Now, he found himself in the midst of a rebellion against the divine. As the fire crackled and the Forgotten spoke of their plans, Aidan couldn't help but feel that the world was on the cusp of a profound change, one that he had inadvertently set in motion. The day had arrived for Aidan to reclaim his birthright. As dawn broke, the horizon was lined with the formidable silhouettes of Aidan and his eclectic army. The Forgotten marched alongside mortal soldiers, an alliance of ancient power and human determination. The capital, a city of towering walls and imposing gates, loomed in the distance. It was a stronghold that had withstood sieges and time. Aidan, mounted on a steed as black as the night, surveyed the city. His heart pounded not just with the anticipation of battle, but with the weight of the moment. This was where he would either reclaim his throne or fall trying. The Forgotten, sensing the importance of the day, channeled their ancient magic. The air crackled with energy as they conjured spells that had not been seen in the mortal realm for centuries. The ground trembled, and the city's defenders looked on in awe and terror. With a mighty roar, the Forgotten unleashed their power against the city's walls. Ancient stones crafted by long-dead masons crumbled under the assault of timeless magic. A breach was formed, a gaping wound in the city's once impenetrable defense. Aidan spurred his horse forward, leading the charge into the breach. The Forgotten, towering and fearsome, followed, their forms blurring between the material and the ethereal. The city's defenders, unprepared for such adversaries, fell back in disarray. The battle for the capital had begun in earnest. Everywhere the clang of steel rang out, interspersed with the otherworldly sounds of the Forgotten's magic. Aidan fought with the skill of a trained warrior, his sword cutting down anyone who stood between him and the palace. The Forgotten, with their immense strength and magic, turned the tide of the battle. Their presence on the battlefield was like a force of nature, unstoppable and awe-inspiring. The city's soldiers, loyal to Aidan's usurping brother, fought bravely, but were gradually overwhelmed. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the initial victories bolstered the morale of Aidan's forces. The palace, the seat of Aidan's stolen throne, was now within sight, its once intimidating walls now just another obstacle to overcome. Aidan, his armor stained with the toil of battle, knew that the hardest fight was still to come. The palace would be heavily fortified, and his brother would not surrender easily. But the sight of the breached walls and the retreat of the city's defenders filled him with a resolute sense of purpose. This was more than just a battle for a throne. It was a battle for justice, for the right to correct a wrong that had altered the course of his life. With the Forgotten at his side, Aidan pressed on, determined to face whatever awaited him within the heart of the capital. In the midst of the chaos and turmoil of the siege, Aidan's forces captured a sage who had been living reclusively within the capital. This sage, old and wizened, with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge, requested an audience with Aidan. Intrigued, and sensing the importance of this meeting, Aidan agreed. They met in a makeshift war tent, with the sounds of battle echoing in the background. The sage, clothed in tattered robes, looked at Aidan with a piercing gaze. He spoke in a voice that, despite its frailty, carried an undeniable authority. "Prince Aidan, your quest for the throne has awakened an ancient prophecy, one that has been whispered about in secret chambers and hallowed halls for generations." The sage began, his hands trembling slightly. Aidan leaned forward, his interest piqued. "What prophecy?" The sage drew a deep breath. "It speaks of an exiled prince who returns in the time of great turmoil. This prince will either be the world's savior or its destroyer. His actions will tip the scales of fate, bringing either salvation or ruin." Aidan's heart skipped a beat. He had embarked on this journey seeking justice and reclamation of his birthright, but now he was faced with a prophecy that spoke of consequences far beyond his own kingdom. "Are you saying that I am this prince?" Aidan asked, a mix of skepticism and concern in his voice. The sage nodded solemnly. "The signs and portents all point to you, Your Highness. Your alliance with the Forgotten, the war you wage, the powers you have awakened, all these are elements of the prophecy." Aidan sat back, his mind racing. The weight of the sage's words was heavy. He had always seen his struggle as a personal one, but now he was being told that his actions could determine the fate of the world. "But how do I know if I am to be the savior or the destroyer?" Aidan asked. "That, Prince Aidan, is a choice you must make through your actions and decisions. The path of destiny is not predetermined. It is shaped by our deeds and our will," the sage replied, his eyes locking with Aidan's. The meeting ended soon after, with the sage being escorted back. Aidan remained in the tent, alone with his thoughts. The noise of the battle outside seemed distant now, as he contemplated the prophecy. Was he the savior or the destroyer? Could he control the fate that seemed to have been thrust upon him? Or was he merely a pawn in a larger cosmic game? These questions haunted him as he prepared to continue the siege, now with the knowledge that his actions could shape the future of the world itself. The siege of the capital intensified, with Aidan and his forces pushing deeper into the city. The Forgotten unleashed their ancient magic with relentless fury, shattering the city's defenses. Amidst the cacophony of clashing steel and crumbling stone, an unforeseen catastrophe was about to unfold. As the battle reached its zenith, a deep, ominous tremor shook the earth. It was not the result of any siege weapon or magical assault. It was something far more ancient and sinister. The very ground beneath the city began to crack and split, opening up like a gaping maw. From this abyssal fissure, a surge of dark energy erupted. It was an ancient evil, a malevolent force that had been imprisoned beneath the city for eons. Freed by the violence and chaos of the war, it emerged with a wrathful hunger. This entity, a being of darkness and malice, manifested as a swirling vortex of shadow, its form ever-changing, never fully tangible. It radiated a palpable aura of malevolence, and its emergence sent a wave of dread through both Aidan's forces and the city's defenders. The Forgotten, despite their power, recoiled at this ancient evil's presence. They had known of its existence, a dark legend from the time before their own exile, but they had never witnessed its terrifying reality. The evil entity began to spread its influence, warping the very fabric of reality around it. The air grew colder, and shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. Warriors on both sides of the conflict were gripped by an unexplainable terror, their hearts filled with an overwhelming sense of despair. Aidan, witnessing this horrifying development, realized the gravity of the situation. This ancient evil was not just a threat to his campaign for the throne, but to the entire world. It was a force that knew no allegiance and sought only to spread its malevolent influence. The battlefield, once a scene of structured chaos, now descended into pandemonium. Soldiers fled in terror, abandoning their posts, while the Forgotten regrouped, trying to comprehend how to combat this newfound adversary. Aidan, standing amidst the turmoil, knew that he had to find a way to contain this ancient evil. The fate of the kingdom, and possibly the world, now rested on his ability to confront not just his mortal enemies, but a darkness that threatened to engulf everything in its path. As the ancient evil began to cast its dark shadow over the battlefield, a new, unprecedented event unfolded. The sky, which had been clouded by the smoke and chaos of war, suddenly cleared. A brilliant, otherworldly light pierced through the gloom, and the gods themselves descended onto the battlefield. These divine beings appeared before Aidan. Their presence was overwhelming, each god radiating an aura of power and authority that made even the Forgotten pause in their tracks. They were beings of different aspects, some embodying the elements, others the virtues and vices of humanity. Aidan, confronted by these celestial beings, felt a mixture of awe and fear. The gods, whom he had only heard of in legends and prayers, now stood before him in all their glory. "Why have you wrought such chaos upon the world, Aidan?" One of the gods, a towering figure robed in starlight, asked with a voice that resonated like thunder. "Your quest for power has unleashed an evil that threatens to consume everything," another god added, her voice as gentle as a breeze but carrying an undeniable edge of sternness. Aidan, standing amidst the ruins of his battle, struggled to find the words. "I sought only to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to right the wrongs done to me," he said, his voice nearly a whisper compared to the divine voices. "You have been blinded by your ambition, young prince," A third god spoke, his form shifting like shadows. In your quest for vengeance, you have become a pawn in a game far greater than your mortal throne. The gods told Aidan of the delicate balance of the world, a balance that his actions had greatly disturbed. They spoke of the ancient evil he had inadvertently unleashed, a force that was once kept in check by their divine will. You must make a choice, Aidan, the star-robed god said solemnly. Continue down this path, and you risk becoming a destroyer, not just of your kingdom, but of the world itself. The god's words echoed in Aidan's mind. He had begun this war with a clear vision of justice and reclamation, but now he saw the broader impact of his actions. The gods did not intervene directly in the affairs of mortals often, and their warning was a clear indication of the gravity of the situation. As the gods ascended back to the heavens, leaving a heavy silence in their wake, Aidan stood amidst the battlefield, torn. His heart still yearned for his throne, but the weight of the potential destruction he could cause loomed large in his mind. The path ahead was fraught with peril, and Aidan now faced the daunting task of navigating it, balancing his personal desires against the greater good. In the aftermath of the divine confrontation, Aidan sought solace in the quiet of his tent, away from the chaos of the battlefield. It was here, in this moment of introspection, that his trusted advisor, an elderly scholar who had served his family for decades, came to him with a revelation that would alter the course of Aidan's destiny. "My prince," the advisor began, his voice trembling with the weight of the secret he was about to divulge. "There is something about your lineage that you must know. This truth has been kept hidden for too long, and in light of recent events, it is time you learned it." Aidan, his mind still reeling from the god's warning, looked at his advisor with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What truth?" he asked. The advisor took a deep breath, his eyes reflecting the gravity of his words. "You are not the son of the king. Your true parentage lies with the gods. You are the child of a powerful deity." The air in the tent seemed to grow still. Aidan felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. He had always identified himself as the rightful heir to the throne, the son of the king. This new revelation shattered that identity. "But how?" Aidan managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother, the queen, was beloved by a god. You were the result of their union," the advisor explained. "It was a secret guarded closely, for fear of the repercussions it would bring." Aidan sat in stunned silence. This truth changed everything. His claim to the throne, his entire life's pursuit, was now cast in a new, uncertain light. He was not just a prince, he was something more, a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. "But why tell me this now?" Aidan finally asked. "The god's appearance, the awakening of the ancient evil, your role in this war, it all points to a destiny far greater than we had imagined," the advisor said. "You must understand your true nature, for it will guide your actions and decisions." The revelation of his divine parentage forced Aidan to reconsider his path. He was no longer fighting just for a throne. He was a part of a larger cosmic tapestry. His decisions and actions held greater significance, and the balance between his mortal ambitions and his divine heritage became a crucial aspect of his journey. As Aidan grappled with this newfound knowledge, the war outside continued. But within the confines of his tent, a prince was coming to terms with his true identity, one that held the potential to either save or doom the world. As the dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, Aidan and his army prepared for what was expected to be a decisive battle. With the recent revelations still weighing heavily on his mind, Aidan knew the importance of this confrontation. It was not just a battle for the throne, but a struggle to define his destiny. The battlefield was a vast expanse just outside the capital, a plain that would soon witness the clash of mortal and ancient forces. Aidan, atop his steed, surveyed his troops, a mixture of human soldiers and the enigmatic Forgotten. His gaze was steely, his resolve hardened by the trials he had endured. However, unknown to Aidan, a conspiracy was brewing within his ranks. A faction of his army, dissatisfied and fearful of the war's direction, had secretly pledged their allegiance to his brother, the usurper king. Lured by promises of land and wealth, they saw this betrayal as a means to secure their future in a post-war kingdom. As the two armies collided in a maelstrom of steel and magic, the traitorous faction executed their plan. At a crucial moment, when Aidan's forces were pushing forward, they turned their weapons against their unsuspecting allies. The effect was immediate and devastating. Confusion and panic spread through Aidan's ranks like wildfire. Soldiers who had fought side by side suddenly found themselves under attack from their comrades. The Forgotten, caught off guard by the treachery, struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing dynamics of the battle. Aidan, in the midst of combat, realized the betrayal too late. The tide of the battle turned swiftly. His forces, now fighting on two fronts, began to falter and crumble. The usurper's army, bolstered by the defectors, pressed their advantage with ruthless efficiency. The battle, which had begun with hope and determination, descended into a chaotic rout. Aidan fought valiantly, cutting down traitor and foe alike, but the odds were overwhelmingly against him. Realizing the futility of the fight, he made the difficult decision to retreat. With a small band of loyal soldiers and a few of the Forgotten, Aidan managed to escape the battlefield, but not without suffering grave losses. The betrayal had not only decimated his army, but had also shaken his faith in his cause. As Aidan and his diminished force retreated into the safety of the forests, the reality of his situation set in. His position was significantly weakened, his army shattered, and his trust in those around him eroded. The path to reclaiming his throne had never seemed more distant, and the weight of his divine heritage felt like a burden rather than a blessing. In this moment of despair, Aidan realized that the road to victory would be far more treacherous than he had ever imagined. In the aftermath of the betrayal, Aidan and his remaining allies regrouped, nursing their wounds and mourning their losses. Despite the setback, Aidan was determined to continue his fight. He rallied his forces, preparing them for another assault on the capital. However, unbeknownst to Aidan, his brother, the usurper king, had been preparing a sinister countermeasure. Secluded in the depths of the palace, the king had commissioned his dark sorcerers to conjure a weapon of immense power, a creature born from the darkest depths of magic. As Aidan's forces approached the battlefield once again, a sense of unease pervaded the air. The sky darkened, and a palpable sense of dread descended upon the troops. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and from the enemy lines emerged a monstrous creation that seemed to defy reality. The creature was colossal, towering over the armies. Its skin was like molten lava, and its eyes burned with a malevolent fire. With each step, the earth trembled, and its roar echoed like thunder across the battlefield. The Forgotten, despite their ancient power, were taken aback by this abomination. It was an affront to the natural order, a being that should not exist. Aidan's mortal soldiers, already weary and disheartened, were paralyzed with fear. The monster charged into Aidan's forces with a ferocity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It swung its massive limbs, crushing soldiers and Forgotten alike. Its fiery breath scorched the earth, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Aidan, witnessing the carnage, realized the enormity of the threat. This was no ordinary foe. It was a culmination of dark magic, a weapon designed to end the war in the usurper's favor. He shouted orders, trying to rally his troops, but the monster's presence sowed chaos and despair among his ranks. The battle, which had started with a glimmer of hope, quickly turned into a nightmare. The monstrous creation wreaked havoc, decimating Aidan's forces and turning the tide of the war once more. Aidan fought valiantly, trying to find a weakness in the creature, but it seemed invincible, a dark testament to his brother's ruthless ambition. As the day wore on, the battlefield became a scene of utter devastation. Aidan, his forces in disarray and his hope dwindling, was forced to witness the destruction of his army. The monster, an unholy creation of his brother's desperation, had changed the course of the war, leaving Aidan's cause hanging by a thread. The path to the throne, once paved with righteous resolve, now lay in ruins, overshadowed by the looming threat of this dark and terrible weapon. In the celestial realms, high above the mortal world where Aidan and his forces struggled, a tumultuous discord arose among the gods. The divine beings, once unified in their watch over the world, now found themselves at odds over the unfolding events below. The emergence of the ancient evil, the awakening of the forgotten, and Aidan's quest. All these had upset the delicate balance of the world. The gods, each with their own perspectives and agendas, debated fiercely on how to respond. Some gods argued for direct intervention, to descend upon the mortal realm and rectify the chaos. Others advocated for a more cautious approach, fearing that their involvement would only exacerbate the situation. A few even suggested that this turmoil was a necessary part of the world's evolution, a trial that would ultimately strengthen it. As the debate intensified, the harmony that had long existed among the gods began to fracture. Lines were drawn, and what started as a heated discussion soon escalated into a full-blown conflict. This divine discord had far-reaching consequences. The barrier between the celestial and mortal realms weakened, and the effects of the gods' strife began to manifest in the world of men. The skies above the battlefields darkened, and fierce storms raged, lashing at both armies with wind and rain. The seas churned violently, unleashing tidal waves that battered coastal cities, while the earth trembled and cracked, swallowing whole villages. The natural order of the world was thrown into disarray, adding to the chaos already unleashed by the war. Aidan, witnessing these cataclysms, realized that the gods' conflict was now directly impacting the mortal realm. The war he had been waging, already complicated by betrayal and dark magic, had now taken on a new, more dangerous dimension. He understood that the battle for the throne was no longer just a struggle for power. It had become a fight for survival in a world that was coming apart at the seams. As the gods' quarrel continued, unleashing havoc across the land, Aidan faced the daunting task of navigating this new reality. The divine conflict, once confined to the heavens, had spilled over into his world, bringing with it a host of new challenges and dangers. The fate of the kingdom, and indeed the world itself, hung in the balance, caught in the crossfire of a battle between gods. The conflict among the gods, once a distant and abstract concept to the mortal realm, reached its zenith in the heavens. The celestial battlefield was a spectacle of divine power and fury, as gods clashed with one another, wielding forces that shaped and shattered realities. In the mortal realm, Aidan and his beleaguered forces could only gaze in awe and terror as the sky above them was illuminated by the gods' battle. Streaks of otherworldly light clashed with thunderous roars, and the very fabric of the sky seemed to tear and mend repeatedly. In the midst of this divine confrontation, a tragedy of cosmic proportions unfolded. Amidst a blinding explosion of celestial light, a deity, known among mortals for their benevolence and wisdom, was struck down. This god, a protector of the natural order and a guardian against darkness, fell from the heavens, their essence dissipating like a shooting star burning out in the night sky. The fall of the god was not just a loss for the divine realm, it sent shockwaves throughout all of existence. In the mortal realm, the effect was immediate and profound. The seas calmed suddenly, the winds ceased their howling, and a heavy, oppressive silence fell over the world. The natural order, which this deity had long safeguarded, now seemed to pause in mourning. For Aidan and the warring factions in the mortal realm, the fall of the god was a moment of sobering clarity. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of power and the far-reaching consequences of their actions. The battlefield, once filled with the clamor of war, grew quiet as soldiers and commanders alike processed the enormity of what had transpired above. In the celestial realm, the death of their kin brought a temporary halt to the gods' conflict. The ramifications of their actions became painfully apparent, leading to a moment of reflection and reconsideration. The balance of power among the gods had shifted dramatically, leaving them to contemplate the future of their stewardship over the world. Back in the mortal realm, Aidan stood amidst his troops, the impact of the gods' fall weighing heavily on him. This event was a turning point, a stark reminder that the war they were fighting was part of a larger, more complex tapestry. The lines between divine and mortal struggles had blurred, and the path forward was fraught with uncertainty and danger. The world, both divine and mortal, had irrevocably changed, and Aidan knew that his next actions would be crucial in shaping the future that was now more unpredictable than ever. In the aftermath of the gods' fall, Aidan retreated to a secluded location, far from the prying eyes of both his enemies and allies. He found refuge in a forgotten ruin, a place that time and conflict had overlooked. Here, in the quiet solitude, Aidan had the opportunity to reflect on his journey, a journey that had begun with a quest for justice and had spiraled into a cataclysmic series of events. Surrounded by the crumbling remnants of a bygone era, Aidan pondered the path he had taken. He thought about the initial betrayal that had set him on this course, his alliance with the Forgotten, and the resulting war that had torn the kingdom apart. He thought about the ancient evil that had been unleashed, the gods' conflict, and the devastating consequences of these events on the world. As he sat amidst the ruins, Aidan realized the extent of the destruction he had played a part in. What had started as a personal quest for his throne had escalated into a struggle with stakes far beyond his own ambitions. He had been so focused on reclaiming what he believed was rightfully his that he had failed to see the broader impact of his actions. The weight of this realization settled heavily on Aidan's shoulders. He understood now that his pursuit of the throne, however justified it might have seemed, had contributed to a greater imbalance in the world. The fall of the god, a being he had once prayed to in his youth, served as a poignant reminder of the far-reaching consequences of his quest. In that moment of introspection, Aidan made a decision. He could no longer continue on his current path. The throne, which had once symbolized his right and his destiny, now seemed like a distant, less significant goal. Aidan resolved to seek redemption, not just for himself, but for the kingdom he had sought to rule. He knew that the path to redemption would not be easy. It would require him to confront the ancient evil he had inadvertently helped release, to mend the fractures caused by the war, and to reconcile the ambitions of a prince with the responsibilities of a deity's offspring. With a newfound resolve, Aidan emerged from the ruins, ready to face the challenges ahead. He was no longer just fighting for a throne. He was fighting to restore balance to a world he had helped disrupt. His journey for redemption had begun, a journey that would require all the strength, wisdom, and courage he possessed. Determined to set things right, Aidan began the task of rallying his remaining allies for one final stand. He traveled through ravaged lands, reaching out to those who had remained loyal to his cause. His message was one of unity and redemption, a call to arms not for the sake of a throne, but to restore balance to a world teetering on the edge of destruction. Among those who answered his call were a handful of his most loyal knights, battle-hardened and steadfast. They were joined by a small contingent of the Forgotten who, despite the turmoil and shifting allegiances, still believed in Aidan's capacity to lead them towards a righteous path. These ancient beings, once powerful and revered, now saw Aidan not just as an ally, but as a beacon of hope in these dark times. In a secluded valley, shrouded by the mists of uncertainty and the scars of battle, Aidan and his allies gathered. Around campfires they planned their course of action. The atmosphere was somber, yet determined, as they understood the magnitude of the task ahead. Aidan outlined their strategy. They would confront his brother, the usurper king, and put an end to his tyrannical rule. But more importantly, they needed to address the greater threat, the ancient evil that had been unleashed. This entity, born from the darkest depths of magic and chaos, was a blight upon the land, threatening to consume everything in its path. The Forgotten, with their ancient knowledge and powers, proposed a plan to contain and possibly banish the ancient evil. It was a risky endeavor, one that required precise coordination and immense sacrifice. But it was a risk they were willing to take for the sake of the world they had once been a part of. The knights, armed with steel and courage, pledged to stand with Aidan against his brother's forces. They knew the battle would be perilous, facing not only the usurper's army but also the monstrosity he had unleashed. Yet in their hearts the flame of valor burned bright, undeterred by the shadows of despair. As they prepared for battle, Aidan looked upon his assembled allies, a patchwork of mortals and immortals, each bound by a common purpose. He knew this could very well be their final stand, a confrontation upon which the fate of the kingdom and the world hinged. The sun rose, casting its first light upon the valley, as Aidan and his allies readied themselves. This was the dawn of their last battle, a battle to end the war and restore balance. They set out, their resolve as strong as the steel in their hands and the magic in their hearts. The day of the final battle dawned, casting a somber light over the battlefield. Aidan and his assembled allies stood ready, facing the vast forces of his usurping brother, the dark silhouette of the ancient evil looming ominously in the background. As the two armies clashed, the sound of steel rang through the air, accompanied by the roar of magic and the cries of warriors. Aidan led his forces with a determination born of a quest for redemption. The Forgotten, wielding their ancient powers, unleashed torrents of arcane energy, holding back the tide of enemy soldiers. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Aidan's knights fought valiantly, their swords cutting through the ranks of the usurper's army. Despite their bravery and skill, they were outnumbered, and the enemy pressed on relentlessly. The Forgotten, for all their power, struggled against the sheer scale of the opposing force and the dark influence of the ancient evil. In the midst of this maelstrom of violence, Aidan spotted his brother, commanding his forces from a distance. Steeling himself, Aidan fought his way through the battlefield, cutting down anyone who stood in his path. His brother, seeing Aidan approach, donned his armor and drew his sword, ready for the confrontation. The brothers faced each other, the history of betrayal and conflict between them palpable in the air. With a shout, they engaged in combat, their swords clashing with the force of years of pent-up anger and resentment. The duel was brutal and intense, each brother an equal match for the other, their blades moving in a deadly dance. As they fought, the ancient evil crept ever closer, its dark presence a looming threat that overshadowed even the fierce battle between the brothers. The air grew colder, and shadows twisted unnaturally, as if eager to engulf the world in darkness. Despite the chaos around them, Aidan and his brother remained locked in their personal battle. Aidan, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose, fought not just for the throne, but for the future of the kingdom and the world. His brother, driven by ambition and a desire to maintain his power, met Aidan's attacks with equal ferocity. The outcome of this battle would not only decide the fate of the two brothers, but also the fate of the kingdom, and perhaps the world itself. As they exchanged blows, the ancient evil drew nearer, ready to unleash its full might upon a world teetering on the brink of destruction. As the climactic battle between Aidan and his brother reached its peak, Aidan began to gain the upper hand. Years of exile, training, and the harsh lessons learned on his journey had honed his skills and resolve. He fought with a mixture of righteous fury and a deep desire to end the cycle of violence and betrayal. Just as Aidan was about to deliver the final blow, a revelation halted his sword mid-air. The ancient evil, a sinister presence that had loomed over the battlefield, began to morph and twist, revealing itself not just as a malevolent entity, but a manipulative force that had orchestrated much of the chaos that had unfolded. Through a series of visions and whispers, Aidan realized the horrifying truth. His journey, from the discovery of the Forgotten to the war against his brother, had been influenced and manipulated by this ancient evil. It had sought its own freedom and power by using Aidan as a pawn, feeding off the chaos and destruction caused by the war. Aidan's brother, equally shocked by this revelation, understood that their conflict had been fueled by external machinations. In that moment of clarity, the brothers' animosity gave way to a mutual understanding of the true enemy they faced. Aidan, grappling with the enormity of his manipulation and the destruction it had caused, knew that he had to make things right. He realized that the only way to stop the ancient evil was a sacrifice, a selfless act that would require all of his divine heritage and the power he had inherited. With a heavy heart, Aidan turned to his brother and the Forgotten, instructing them to lead the remaining forces to safety. He then turned towards the ancient evil, ready to confront it in a final act of redemption. Aidan channeled all his power, the divine energy coursing through his veins, and confronted the ancient evil. The air crackled with raw energy as Aidan and the entity clashed in a battle of wills and power. The ground shook, and a brilliant light enveloped them both. In the end, Aidan's act of self-sacrifice succeeded in containing the ancient evil, sealing it away once more. However, the cost was great. Aidan, having used all his divine essence in the battle, was no more. The world, forever changed by the events that had transpired, slowly began to heal. The war ended, and peace gradually returned. Aidan's brother took the throne, but he ruled with a newfound wisdom and a deep sense of responsibility, always remembering the lessons and the sacrifice of his brother.